We're going to look now at how protein is used by our bodies. And this may seem an unrelated topic, but you'll see how it all ties together in a moment. This research is conducted by Douglas Padden Jones through the University of Texas, and he has done research for NASA and some other organizations, but really looking at how protein, when it's ingested, taken in and eaten, how it reacts inside the body, and looking at young people and old people and our abilities to use protein, how much we need, and really how we should spread that out over the course of the day. So though it might seem that protein is very different from cholesterol, and it is, but it can't be completely eliminated from the topic because it tends to be those protein foods that we pick on the most when we're looking at a cholesterol lowering diet, because it is the fats that are in our protein foods that are the one that we're trying to reduce. So we're going to look at really really, do we need to cut out protein foods, or do we just really need to look at how we consume those foods? So the research from Dr. Padden Jones tells us that protein is really very important for us, but the problem is that most Americans really eat it all wrong. So starting with some really basic research, Dr. Padden Jones showed that the body is going to be building proteins no matter what. So whether we've eaten or not, there's going to be some proteins that are going to be produced in the body. And this is present whether you are young or you are old. Now if you add some amount of protein, in this case 30 grams of protein, you're going to see the addition of more protein being produced. This is very significant, in fact, a 50% increase in the amount of protein that's produced by your body. And this is irregardless of whether you are young or old. So it's really very good to say that your ability to build muscle does not change as you age. It's really very dependent upon the amount of protein that you take in. So we can say that we know how much protein we need to take in, but when do we need to take it in? What's really that magic timing that's going to allow us to maximize our protein building? Let's take a little step back and look at what is that 30 grams of protein that the research is showing us. We're looking at really a relatively small portion of protein. This is a moderate amount, about the size of a deck of cards, maybe slightly larger, the size of a palm of your hand. This isn't a big amount, so we're looking at a regular size piece of chicken, or if you're looking at a steak, it would be a 4-ounce steak. This isn't the 12-ounce steak. This is the 4-ounce steak. So typically this is less than what most people would eat at a serving, or much more than what a person would have at a breakfast serving. But it's a very moderate amount of protein, not a large serving. Reminding you of that earlier slide that we saw, your body does produce some protein even in the fasting state, meaning you haven't had anything to eat, and that amount is increased significantly when you have added in some protein, in this case that 30 grams of protein. But what if we were to challenge our body and maybe double or triple the amount of protein that we put in? Well, the research shows that if you, instead of consuming that 4-ounce piece of steak and instead have the 12-ounce steak, you really don't see a significant increase in the amount of protein that you're able to build. Slightly more, but really not a significant amount. So truly, more is not better. Having the 4-ounce steak is really about the same as having the 12-ounce steak as far as the way that it metabolizes in your body and produces muscle. So though people like to say that more is better, when it comes to protein, more really isn't better, and that more is just going to equal more going into storage, which most people don't need. And when I say storage, I mean it's going to go into fat, either in your belly or your booty. It's just going to be extra. So we showed that more isn't necessarily better. Well, what about less? So not enough protein, well, that's not necessarily good either. So if we look at the amount of muscle synthesis that goes on, that would be that muscle building. In the young and the old, it's relatively the same when you have adequate amounts of protein. But when you have less than enough protein, in this case less than 15 grams of protein, in the young, well, it cuts it by about half. But what about the elderly? In less than half. So this is where the average elder, having less than enough protein is really going to significantly impact the way that they are able to maintain their muscle mass. So when we're looking at how our older people lose their muscles over time, it probably has a lot to do with the choices that they're making as far as protein foods. And if you look at the average American and the amount of protein foods that they have, particularly at breakfast, they're really not getting enough protein. So your 15 gram, well, that could be I only had a bagel and a glass of milk. That's only going to be about 14 gram of protein. Maybe I only had oatmeal for breakfast. That's about 5 gram. So you can see where breakfast tends to be a relatively protein poor meal for many people. So too much protein, not necessarily a good thing. Not enough protein is really not a good thing. So really think about your breakfast. Did you get enough protein? And does that protein equal 30 gram? And this is significant when you look at just the way that the average American will distribute their protein over the course of the day. So it is the average American who will have a poor protein source in the morning, maybe a little bit more at lunch. People will have a sandwich or maybe a salad. And then at dinner, we're going to really load up on that protein and have that big protein-rich meal. You know, we could really significantly cut that dinner protein and we're still going to get the same metabolic effect. We really don't need that much protein at a time, as we showed earlier. Now what if we change that distribution significantly and we made our breakfast more protein rich and our lunches more protein rich, and then dinner, maybe we made it a little bit more moderate in protein, and then you can see that these little hills that we create of protein building are going to be maximized from breakfast and lunch and dinner. And here we're really seeing that ideal of a moderate amount of protein intake that is going to produce a maximum amount of protein building in the body each day. So as we tie together protein and cholesterol, though people would like to say that we just don't need to have protein foods at all, I think it's really important to suggest that maybe we need to look at how much protein that we have and the amounts that we have over the course of the day, how we distribute them. So really, is it that steak is a bad type of a food for you, or is it that we just eat too much of it at a time? Does anybody really need a 12-ounce steak? And so to send this message one more time, there's a short video from Dr. Padden Jones. You can hear it directly from him.